Why is it that the quietest person in the room is almost always the most powerful one in it? It's not because they have nothing to say. It's because somewhere along the way, they learned something most people never do. That silence isn't weakness. It's a weapon. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to use it. We're taught from a very young age that communication solves everything. Explain yourself, and people will understand. Defend yourself, and people will believe you. Argue your case clearly enough, and you'll win. It sounds reasonable. It's also, most of the time, wrong. Watch what actually happens when you follow that instinct. The more you explain, the more you're asked to explain, because you've just shown that your explanations are negotiable. The more you defend yourself, the guiltier you look, even when you've done nothing wrong, because defense implies there was something worth defending against. The more you argue your case, the more power you hand to the person provoking you, because now they know exactly which buttons work. Silence isn't the absence of a response. It's a response. And more often than people realize, it's the strongest one available. This isn't a video about becoming cold, distant, or hard to reach. It's about something much more specific. Learning exactly when your words are worth spending and when they're not. There were 8 situations where staying quiet will do more for you than anything you could say. Let's go through them, one at a time. Provocation only works if you react to it. That's the entire mechanism, and it's worth sitting with for a second, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. A jab, an insult, a passive-aggressive comment, a dig disguised as a joke, none of it carries any power on its own. It's inert. It needs your response to complete the transaction. The provoker throws something out, and if you catch it, if you get defensive, raise your voice, explain yourself, or fire something back, you've just handed them exactly what they were fishing for. Proof that it landed. Now, picture the alternative. Someone throws the same jab, and you simply don't catch it. You let it pass through the space between you and land on nothing. No defense, no comeback, just quiet. Watch what happens to that person's face in that moment. There's a flicker of confusion, because their script assumed you'd play your part, and you didn't. People who try this on you once and get silence back rarely try it a second time, not because you punished them, but because there was nothing for them to work with. The bait sat there, untouched, and eventually they had to pick it back up themselves.
To be clear, this isn't about suppressing what you feel. You're allowed to feel the sting of a provocation. This is about choosing, deliberately, when and whether to spend your energy responding to someone else's bait, instead of handing over your composure for free every single time someone tests it. Not every why deserves an answer. Some questions are asked in good faith, from people who genuinely want to understand you better. Others are asked to put you on trial for a decision you've already made, calmly, deliberately, and for reasons that are entirely yours. Here's the trap. The moment you start explaining a decision that was never actually open for negotiation, you've quietly reopened it. Without meaning to, you've told the other person, "Convince me otherwise, and I might change my mind." Every sentence of justification is an invitation to argue back. A simple, "This is what I've decided," without the 3 paragraphs of justification behind it, closes that door instead of leaving it cracked open. It's not rudeness, it's clarity. And clarity, stated once and then left alone, is far more convincing than the same point defended 5 different ways to 5 different objections. This shows up everywhere. Turning down a request you don't have the bandwidth for, ending a relationship that's run its course, setting a boundary with a family member who's used to you folding. In
every one of these, the instinct is to over-explain, because over-explaining feels like kindness. But often what it actually does is signal that the decision is still up for negotiation and invite exactly the pushback you were hoping to avoid.
This one's harder than the first two because it isn't about strangers or provocateurs. It's about people who actually matter to you. When someone hurts you, the instinct is to make sure they know it, to put it into words, to argue your side until they finally understand the damage they've done, to make your pain visible enough that they can't ignore it. But pain performed for an audience rarely lands the way you hope it will. Either it escalates the conflict into something bigger than the original wound, or worse, it gives the other person exactly the reaction they wanted, whether they'd admit that to themselves or not. Going quiet here isn't about pretending you're fine when you're not. It's about processing the hurt on your own terms, in your own time, instead of turning it into a live performance for the person who caused it. There's a particular kind of dignity and composure that outlasts an argument, the kind that doesn't fade after the conversation ends. And in a strange, quiet way, the people who hurt you tend to learn far more from watching you hold yourself together than they ever would from hearing you explain exactly how much they broke.
This is the one that separates quiet discipline from mere restraint, because it's the hardest test of all. When you're certain, genuinely certain, the pull to prove it is at its strongest. Certainty wants an audience. It wants to be witnessed, validated, applauded. But certainty doesn't actually need any of that to remain true. A fact doesn't become more accurate because you convinced someone else of it. A good decision doesn't become better because you won the argument about it. Notice something the next time you're in a disagreement. The people who are constantly explaining why they're right are, more often than not, still trying to convince themselves. The people who are actually secure in their position just move. They let time, results, and outcomes speak for them, instead of spending their breath on the argument. It's not that they don't care, it's that they've stopped needing to be believed in the moment. There's a specific kind of pressure some people apply. They need an answer right now, a yes or no, on the spot, before you've had a chance to think. It shows up in negotiations, in arguments, in decisions you're being pushed to make faster than you're comfortable with. The pressure to respond immediately is rarely about efficiency. Far more often, it's a tactic, because a rushed answer is a worse answer, and the person applying the pressure usually knows it. Silence here looks like simply not filling the gap. Letting the question sit in the air for 3, 5, 10 seconds longer than feels comfortable. Saying, "I'll think about it and get back to you," instead of manufacturing an answer just to end the discomfort of the pause. The person who can tolerate silence in that moment almost always ends up with more leverage than the person trying to force a decision out of them. This is a skill, and like any skill, it gets easier with practice. The first few times you let a silence stretch past the point of comfort, it will feel unbearable. That discomfort fades. What replaces it is something close to control.
There's a version of this discipline that's easy to miss, because it isn't about conflict at all. It's about the quiet urge to announce your progress, the new habit, the change you're making, the person you're becoming, before it's actually settled into who you are. Talking about a change you're making can feel like commitment. In practice, it often works the opposite way. The words earn you a small hit of the recognition your future results would have earned you. And once that need is partially satisfied, some of the pressure to actually follow through quietly disappears. The people who change the most visibly are almost without exception the ones who said the least about it while it was happening. They let the after speak instead of narrating the during. There's a real kind of power in becoming someone different
while everyone around you is still operating on an outdated version of who you are, and then simply letting them catch up on their own.
Being misunderstood is one of the most uncomfortable feelings there is. Someone gets your intentions wrong, tells a version of a story that isn't quite true, or forms an opinion of you based on partial information. And every instinct says, correct it, set the record straight, make sure they know the real version. Sometimes that's worth doing, but often, chasing every misunderstanding turns into a full-time job with no endpoint, because there will always be someone who's got it wrong. You can spend your entire life explaining yourself to people who were never really listening in the first place, and still not catch up to every misread version of you that's out there. The people who seem most secure in who they are tend to let most of this go, not because they don't care what's true, but because they've decided that living consistently is a better use of their energy than narrating themselves. Over time, consistent behavior corrects far more misunderstandings than any explanation ever could, and it does it without you having to say a single defensive word. Underneath almost every instinct in this video is one shared fear: that if you don't speak up, people will think less of you. That your silence will be mistaken for guilt, weakness, or indifference. That your reputation needs constant tending, or it will quietly erode. Here's what's worth sitting with. Reputation built on constant explanation is fragile, because it depends entirely on you winning every single argument, forever, in front of everyone. Reputation built on consistent action is far sturdier, because it doesn't need you in the room to hold up. It exists in what you've actually done, not in what you've managed to convince people of. This doesn't mean you never correct the record, defend yourself, or speak up. It means you stop treating every perceived threat to your image as an emergency that requires an immediate vocal response. Most of them aren't. Most of them pass on their own. None of this means going cold, shutting people out, or turning silence into a weapon you use to punish someone. That's not discipline. That's just another form of reacting, dressed up to look like control. Real quiet discipline is choosing, deliberately, when your words are worth spending. Most of the time, they're not needed at all. The moment you stop explaining yourself to people who were never going to listen, the moment you stop performing your pain, your certainty, your growth, or your reputation for an audience, you get something back that arguing never gave you: your energy, your peace, and ironically, their respect. Stay quiet. Stay disciplined.